Are you trying to navigate this crazy thing called life? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unraveling with Rayne.
Degree programs and studied digital technology and culture. And that kind of got me into social media and got me interested in kind of the impacts of social media on culture and business and everything else. And eventually that turned into me getting into a business degree, and I graduated with an MBA in management and strategy. So not really social media related, but it's still
all goes hand in hand.
Helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think that, I know that you mentioned, culturally and business-wise, as far as how social media works, which kind of drew you in first, do you say?
Well, culturally, for sure. I mean, at first it was, you go on Twitter and you're, meeting all these weird people that you've never met for real life, Yeah. And you're making connections, and then Facebook comes around and you're connecting with all these friends that you had from high school and from college, and then eventually your mom and dad, and right. And so that kind of changes the cultural landscape, and I think it's undeniable now. In 2007 it was oh wow, that's a really neat weird thing. MySpace had come and gone for the most part, and everybody had made those gaudy MySpace landing pages that were just full of animated GIFs. And
I was so angry. Oh, I was, let's see, middle school, end of middle school, first part of high school, when I started getting into MySpace, and so I was really upset when I had to switch to this new platform, this Facebook thing, and I couldn't customize it. I was like, what? I can't put sparkles and borders and music? How are people going to know what my emotions are if they can't hear the music?
It was so smooth for me because I was so tired of going onto everybody's pages and having
sensory overload.
It just every time you change a page, there should be a warning for may cause seizures kind of thing, because that's kind of the way it was at that time. But I've really enjoyed social media and the way that it's impacted culture, the way it's obviously impacted my life. I mean, it's how I make my living now. So I think that culturally it's just probably as relevant as the telephone was. And maybe more so because it actually bridges a lot more gaps than the telephone did at the time that it came out.
So it sounds like you kind of experienced it all as it was happening. You're kind of put in that direction, and then you got to watch it grow into what it is now. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Such humble beginnings, and here it is. It's everywhere.
Facebook, you had to have a .edu email address to get started, and then that expanded out into everybody being able to use it, and so you saw this just rapid growth into on Facebook in particular that just was unbelievable. Everybody was getting on Facebook, and so as is natural, businesses, they go, hey, if everybody's there, that's where I need to be. And so naturally Facebook says, hey, now we know how to make money.
For sure.
And so they brought businesses on, and as is typical, marketers ruin everything.
So did you even foresee that happening with social media when you first started kind of getting into it?
Well, I had hopes that Facebook wouldn't monetize, that it would be more of a utility, and that everybody kind of would be on the same level playing field. But it became clear as the network got bigger, and as they brought in additional competition in the form of LinkedIn and Twitter and other platforms, that there was no way to sustain that. And as they added more services in terms of games and all of these other things that kind of rolled out, you realized that, you know what, server space is going to be an issue here. It's going to be a big issue because that kind of stuff costs money.
Right.
It costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got the sense that there's only so much that investors will tolerate before you have to go public, and then so they can cash out, right?
Yeah.
And so eventually, when they went public, it was like, okay, well, this is the natural progression of things, and this is what they needed to do anyway.
Right.
So it became obvious as more and more businesses entered the platform and started using it as a way to communicate with their audience.
Yeah.
But it wasn't what I wanted by any stretch. I think I wanted a more level playing field where everybody kind of had the same opportunities without having to pay to play kind of a thing.
Right. I remember when they first kind of started to introduce you can boost this, you pay this, and I'm like, wait, this is a completely different. This is a whole nother monster now.
Oh yeah. It changed the whole game.
Yeah.
And as they opened up the API for games and for apps and for all sorts of different ways to interface with the data background, like the thing that we play with, our news feed is meaningless. The part that is really important is all those clicks where we click like or share or comment. All of that data is just massively valuable, and I think we're seeing a lot of that right now with a lot of the things that are going on, and Mark Zuckerberg coming out over the last couple of days now saying that they need to be regulated.
Yeah.
That might be a play just so they don't regulate him, but it is kind of it's grown into a legit monster.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of contemplating this because obviously this is not my arena, but we all interact with social media all the time.
Yeah.
And then when you have to look at it from like a business perspective, like as an entrepreneur or somebody who's just starting a small business, you have to like compete with these big businesses that have the money to keep pushing their ads and all these different things. And I guess I kind of wish that it was a little bit more of an even playing field, It
still is, because the same money that you spend is getting the same type of impact as their money is. So you may not be able to spend as much, but you're still able to impact your bottom line or impact your reach or your influence at the same value proposition.
Sure.
And so in terms of scale, you have a lot more opportunity to scale. They don't.
Right.
By not putting money into that platform, they actually stand to lose. Whereas you only stand to gain.
That's true. That makes sense.
And so it's really a lopsided in favor of the small business, the entrepreneur, the people that are just starting, versus the bigger businesses. They still profit, but they can't profit without putting money into it.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why it does kind of level the playing field.
Yeah.
The other thing is that ultimately, and I tell this to all my clients and everybody that will listen, is that it's not media. It's not digital media. It's not internet media. It's social media, right? That's the phrase that we need to always remember. And I kind of look at it as kind of a return back to really small towns. Okay, except that your small town is now the globe, right?
Okay.
You can walk into the drugstore in 1950s and everybody's going to know your business. They just will. It's just the nature of small towns.
Right.
Well, it provides the same opportunity to small businesses now. They can visit your page and know everybody's business if you're making it social. True. If you're using it as a purely, profit center or another marketing gimmick, then it doesn't have that same impact. And so I've kind of coined the term the Cheers philosophy of social media, and that's really the impetus that I have for all my clients, and it's the best way for developing relationships and trust and community and all of the things that you don't have to pay for. Right? You can pay to reach people that aren't part of that community yet,
Yeah.
But ultimately, they're not going to become part of a community just because you paid to show them something.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to become part of a community based on the value proposition, what kind of a relationship you're proposing with them. If that relationship is purely transactional, odds are it's not going to be that much of a relationship. If it's more about building community around your brand or your services, then that changes the equation a little bit. And so social media should be social first and then a marketing thing second.
I'm so happy to hear you kind of bring it back to that aspect as far as like you said, it's social media.
Yeah.
And we need to keep it social and use it for what it was, intended for, really.
Yeah.
And go ahead,
no, you're exactly right. And so Facebook is recognizing that they've kind of they went past the point of no return.
Yeah.
And they're trying desperately to climb back. They're like Wile E. Coyote over the cliff looking back and going, I made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And I think right now in social media and in the way we communicate with each other in a mass media kind of an arena, things are going to be changing dramatically over the next couple of years because of that overshot. That overshot has put people in a defensive position with social media, and that's not where we need to be if we're going to be creating community and sharing and being social.
Right.
Because every time you put up a wall, guess what? That's a little antisocial, right? That's the opposite of social, and that's kind of what we're at right now. Is that everybody's kind of pulling back and reeling things in a little bit because they're feeling like I'm giving a bunch of data to someone and they're using it for purposes that I didn't know about or want.
Sure.
And so they've become really defensive with that now. And so I anticipate other social networks kind of finding a way to get back to the social portion of it, but still being able to monetize in different ways.
Okay.
And so I think there will be opportunities over time to and maybe Facebook does it, maybe it's Instagram, which is also Facebook, or maybe it's Google or Twitter or some unnamed person so far that comes out and does something that's just completely different and changes the landscape a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like Instagram is a weird thing for me because it's social, like in the aspect of like you can comment and respond and blah blah blah, but Instagram is all about the image, just that snapshot image of whatever's happening. So I feel like it has a lot of potential to carry that social aspect, but then it almost stops itself from being social in a way. I don't know. That's just my perception of it.
It's a really good thought to look at it that way, because really what we're only commenting on an image. We can't investigate deeper thinking or blogs for that matter or anything that a lot of people interact with. And so Facebook was struggling with that aspect because so many people were getting content in their newsfeed that was not social. And so they were seeing all this news and memes and all these things that weren't creating conversations, that weren't creating the social element of it.
Yeah.
And so they've tried to use mathematics to say, oh, no, we're going to make it so you see fewer memes and more things that will get people to start a conversation.
Yeah.
And there's it appears to be working-ish.
Yeah.
But it's damaging the businesses that have come to rely on that reach.
Yeah.
And so Facebook is struggling on a whole bunch of different fronts. First of all, businesses don't want to pay to reach their audience. They just don't. They felt like this was a tool that was free, and now all of a sudden, if they want to reach anybody, it's not free anymore. And so that's kind of changed the landscape a little bit for Facebook, and then some of the recent scandals have changed the landscape for Facebook. I would still say that they're hard to beat, but there's definitely an opportunity arising, and I see some things changing over the next probably 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I definitely agree as far as the interaction aspect of it. I mean, coming from a blogger standpoint, like Instagram is so challenging because you can't link things, and if you want them to just read the most recent blog, you have to go and change your bio and put that link and like go to my page and look at this link, and you have to like really like guide them through the process, whereas Facebook, you just like post it and they're like, oh, I'm gonna read that, I'm gonna click on that.
And I don't think Instagram's going to change that, which is great for a lot of reasons, because it provides that outlet for us to just be natural, just be human, just be people dealing with other people.
Right. But essentially, I guess what I would like to see is something that is kind of like Facebook, but like more Facebook, like in the old days. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I think they're trying to turn back the clock a little bit. Like I said, the Wile E. Coyote that flew off the cliff, and they're like, oh, that was a mistake. Let's go back.
Right.
And I think they're trying to make that happen. The problem is that now they have too many people to make happy. Right?
Yeah.
So they have the users, which are actually the product.
Right.
Right? The users, they have to make them happy, because if they leave, then they don't have a product to sell.
Right.
Right? But then they have the advertisers, or the business people that want to buy that product, that they need certain elements. They need to be able to actually contact these people. And then they have investors.
Right.
And so all of these different groups have to be happy. And they all have different needs that are in direct conflict with the other.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a balancing act that I don't know that any social media network is going to be able to navigate successfully.
Yeah. Because
there's too many conflicting interests.
Yeah. I would not want to be the person that had to manage that balance.
No, and that's where you have to give a little bit of credit to Facebook for making it as long as they have now. I mean, almost 10 years, or actually a little over 10 years now, of Facebook being open to the public and them navigating, becoming a publicly owned company, and they've done a pretty spectacular job.
Right.
And the great thing is that they're not done.
Right.
Right. There's still a lot of opportunity. Yeah. They're still looking at virtual reality, augmented reality, and changing the landscape of what social media looks like from that perspective. So we've got a couple of cameras up in the room, which is awesome. Now imagine those cameras are capturing this for artificial reality. And so now this is being put onto social media, and people can, and we have our little VR goggles on, right? Yeah. And we can shake hands with people who are watching us.
Yeah. My husband and I contemplate the like how virtual reality is actually going to manifest itself. Like, what's going to be? Is it going to be like a gamer thing first, or maybe social media first, or like entertainment first? Like, what's going to be? Because it's so hard. I feel like the technology itself and all the things that they have actually been able to create are really clunky. Like, they're not as fluid in the environment as you would like them to be, as like, say, your phone that you just look at or whatever. Right. Like, and if you're in a room full of people also, then you have to think about, well, what am I wearing to, view this content, or, how is that going to work? You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah. So the way technology generally works is, first of all, it gets used in defense.
Yeah.
And it's working fine there.
Sure.
I mean, there are people flying drones using VR. Right. And that's working fantastic for them, right? Yeah. But then it moves into gaming.
Right.
Okay. Inevitably, this will always move into gaming, and then entertainment on expanded entertainment options from there.
Yeah.
Social media is part of that, only because
entertainment.
Only because we have companies like Facebook and YouTube that are developing their own entertainment divisions.
Right.
Okay, so Facebook TV, they actually have several different series of professional quality filming.
They do.
That's available there. Same with YouTube Red and the whole series of different movies and things that are available on YouTube Red.
Right.
And so those will eventually morph into virtual reality, which will then eventually become part of the social media structure because of Facebook.
Sure.
And they've invested very heavily in virtual reality.
Really?
It's Mark Zuckerberg says it's the future of their company.
Really?
It's the future of social media, is what he says, and they've invested so much into it that their last 2 F8 conferences, which is a big developers conference for Facebook, the biggest, most attended sessions have been the virtual reality sessions, because that's where Mark is, right? So Mark Zuckerberg comes out and he puts on the goggles and he has someone in, New York or wherever put on their goggles, but they also happen to have their phone with them, and so they'll pick up their phone and share through VR back to what he's seeing. He can grab that off of the virtual coffee table, throw it up in front of him, and see what they're showing through their phone.
What?
While they're looking at him in virtual reality.
What?
Yeah. It's pretty intense.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Could you imagine using that?
Yeah. And he did a little stunt at the first conference.
I'm going to have to go look up this info.
Yeah. He did a stunt on their first conference where they introduced this, where he had a 360-degree camera on his coffee table at the house. And he used the VR goggles, manipulated something that wasn't there physically, but artificially there.
Yeah.
He manipulated it and pulled that up and put it up on his screen, his VR screen. Everybody else is seeing what Mark is seeing. They're seeing the other person's avatar and a little screen over here, and that screen is showing what's on the 360-degree camera. And that 360-degree camera, he can just grab part of the screen with his hand and move it over, and that pans the viewing angle. And so he was able to see in his living room and pan and see his dog on the couch. And he made a comment, "Oh, that dog's in trouble. It's not supposed to be on the couch," right?
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of a gimmicky, fun little thing that they did, but that's like the future of VR.
Yeah.
They weren't in the same building. The person that was the avatar, and they could watch his camera together from their own virtual realities across, time and space. And
that is so crazy. I mean, the more I interact with Facebook and the more I do like live streaming and like podcasting and like little like live streams in our podcaster group, like I just think how cool it would be to be like that much closer to the people that you're talking to. Here we are, we're actually meeting in this space. Like we can't physically be there, but we're like almost physically here together,
Yeah, and VR will get us there. It's a long way coming. It is still clunky. You still have like when you're moving your arm and stuff, because they use these cameras to mimic your motion. When you move your arm to reach out and grab something, there's little gloves that your VR headset will record your arm reaching out, and the arm looks like it's doing one of these things, right?
Spaghetti arm.
It's just weird movements that are definitely not the movements that he's making to pick something up.
Yeah.
But you're still getting the sense of, sharing space, even though, you're thousands of miles away, potentially.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of potential in the VR area. It's a matter of who's going to get there first.
It's always a matter of who's going to get there first.
It really is. And Facebook seems to be investing the most right now. No one ever knows what Google's doing.
That's true.
They have their projects that are just kind of unknown to the rest of humanity until they all of a sudden come out with this self-driving thing that might be a car.
Right. Who knows, right?
So you never know what Google's going to come up with and how they're going to come out with their VR. And so, and there's a lot of other players in the field too that could make changes in a big hurry. Apple is definitely in the mix.
Yeah.
Amazon's definitely in the mix. Amazon.
I'd like to see some, I feel like Amazon is coming a long way as far as different things that they're branching out into. I feel like they're definitely making their way.
Yeah. Amazon is poised to be probably the biggest company in the world.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the reasons that you said, that they're spreading out their wings.
Mm-hmm.
So Amazon, and I'm kind of separating myself from social media here, but that's okay because I
was going to say maybe we should.
This is my area, right?
Yeah.
I stay very well informed about tech, and I'm always interested in where things are going. But Amazon's a really interesting company because they have invested in all the things that everybody else needs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're looking at opening up their own bank.
Really?
Yep, they're looking at opening up their own bank and becoming a banking institution, which would save them countless thousands of dollars a day in transaction fees. Because if you have an Amazon bank and you buy from Amazon, why would we charge ourselves money?
Right.
That
just makes sense.
Why would we do that? So they already have the largest and most affordable server system out there. Netflix uses them. I mean, everybody uses Amazon's server system.
Right.
And they bought out grocery chain.
Yes.
They are putting up their own grocery chains.
Yes. I wish we had Amazon Fresh, or is that started here yet?
No, it probably won't. Amazon Fresh is their biggest loser in terms of profit. It makes no money, and it loses money pretty frequently.
But when you've got kids, it'd be so nice if all that could just come to your door like everything
else.
So
the only way that happens is if drone technology is
Drones
expanding.
are kind of scary to me.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. They kind of
Everybody's
freak me out a little bit. I'm cool for change and embracing the now and the new, but drones are kind of scary to me.
Yeah. Now, and I can respect that, and I can understand that. There's a lot of privacy concerns there.
Yeah.
A lot of people are concerned about, well, if it has a camera on it, what's it seeing? What's it saying? What's it sending back to Amazon that they can use against me? All of these different things that they're concerned about.
Sure.
And I completely understand that, and I respect that. And right up until I see someone do one of those surveys for Facebook that tells which Kardashian you are, when I see that, then I realize that all of that person's privacy concerns about drones are completely negated by those silly little surveys.
Yes.
And so we make calculated decisions about what we're willing to accept and what we're not willing to accept. And so for the sake of convenience, you're going to say, do you know what? I don't want to go to the grocery store. I don't even want to go to the grocery store and they bring the stuff out to my car.
Right, which they are doing now.
Which is great. That's an awesome service. I want to sit in my house and I want to have a head of lettuce delivered by a drone in 20 minutes. That you will sacrifice some of your security, some of your privacy for the sake of being able to have that, because then you don't have to leave your house.
Right.
And as that is, and a little antisocial, right? But
you can really be a hermit for a week.
Yeah, I mean, and there are people that have enough nutrition delivered to their door via Amazon Prime that they actually never have to leave their house.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I guess that's cool.
You think about other aspects too, maybe elderly people that can't get to the store and they don't necessarily want somebody to do their shopping for them. They just want to, have that, like, I can do this myself.
Yep.
I can
push a button and a drone shows up 20 minutes later.
Yeah. So, yeah, drones are great and kind of scary, but I think it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah.
Really.
It is kind of inevitable. Yeah. And so, Amazon has expanded into all of these different areas. And believe it or not, Amazon is one of the largest social media networks.
Really?
You're not going to believe this. But the comment section where you review products and comment on products has become a massive social network.
I guess I didn't really consider that.
People will give feedback back and forth to each other. There's certain products that if you go look at the reviews of those products, they're hilarious, right? Through Wolf Moon. Yeah. That's a fantastic, go look up that product and read the reviews. you're going to see a lot of social interaction going on in the comment section and in the discussion about those products, and it really is a social environment. And Amazon has kind of left it as this kind of quirky community.
Yeah.
They just have to turn a knob and bam,
there it is.
It's a social network.
Yeah, I love that because my in-laws are like Amazon review fanatics. Like anytime my husband and I are talking about like buying something, they're like, well, we looked it up on Amazon and we read all the reviews. And I'm like, oh man, you found some really crazy reviews on that. I don't know if we want that anymore. But
Yeah, it is. It's interesting and it's a really useful tool. Right up until the point where you don't make any decisions because everything has bad reviews.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So
sometimes you just have to roll the dice.
That's exactly right. But yeah, so technology is going all sorts of different ways, and social media is always going to be part of that. It's going to feed into the growth of Amazon. Amazon pays a crap ton of money to Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of different networks to get their ads in front of you.
Yeah, why don't we define that? So what would be like social media, strictly social media platforms?
Well,
because I know, like you said, with Amazon, it's kind of a mixed, like there's social media aspects, but
yeah. So I'll break them up into what we perceive as being a social media.
Okay.
So that's Twitter, that's Facebook, that's Instagram, Pinterest to a degree, and LinkedIn.
Okay.
Those are kind of the main ones. And then there's some other ones. Google Plus is still a legit social network, believe it or not. That's not how it's being used primarily now.
Yeah.
Particularly by businesses. Businesses have kind of moved on from that, and Google has pushed them in a different direction from the Google Plus social environment. But actually, Google's biggest social network is actually YouTube. And YouTube isn't typically seen as a social environment.
Right.
But with YouTube channels, you can create communities and where you can post a video specifically to the community or post a comment or a question to the community, and they can engage just like they would on any other social platform.
True.
And so, and of course, the comment section, the cesspool that it is on YouTube, you know, that's social, whether we like to admit it or not.
Yeah.
It is a social network.
I'm so on the fence about YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm so on the fence about YouTube.
As a parent, I struggle with it.
Yeah.
Because it's the wild, wild west. It really is. It's kind of a no holds barred, whatever you can get away with goes, right? And so as a parent, I struggle with that because I have kids from 3 to almost 17, and there's a lot of content on there that is objectionable to me for my values, and I don't want my kids seeing some of that. And so you have to, that's one of the things that as a social media professional people are always asking me, so are your kids on social media? I'm like, yeah, because they don't have any choice. Right. Because eventually, no matter what you do as a parent, they're going to leave your house, right? And if they aren't on social media, that puts them at a disadvantage. And so it becomes incumbent upon us as parents to teach our kids social media and be ahead of them in that curve.
So how do you navigate that with your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's a daily task. It really is, because I have kids that they get on Instagram and they send direct messages through Instagram thinking that dad doesn't know anything about direct messages, but dad really does. And they have conversations and they share memes, and it's just lots of crazy sauce. And then they also have self-deleting messages on those platforms. And so you have all sorts of different things going on in the social media sphere for that kids are gaining access to. So none of my kids are allowed to have a social network until they're 13. So they can't have their own social profile. They can't have their own email until they're 13, which is technically a federal law. Sure. So that is just the way of the world. That's the way the law is written. So they're going to hold to it. They're not going to fake their age or anything like that. I have people that I know that are 21 on their profile, but they're actually like 12, which is depressing, because if their profile is public, people assume that they're 21 when they're actually 12. And so that's an opportunity for predators and lots of really unsavory communication. And so none of my kids are allowed to till they're 13. When it comes to digital devices and their screen time, they don't own anything, whether they paid for it or not. If it's in my house and using my Wi-Fi, I own it. As long as you're my child, I own whatever you have, and I will control your access to those things. And so the hard and fast rule is that if I want whatever you're looking at or whatever device you happen to be using, you don't get a choice. You will hand it to me. I get it then. Not when you delete something or change something or remove your history or whatever they're going to do. I get it right now. And so that prevents a lot of those problems that can arise where kids are doing things that they know aren't right when you're doing just spot checks.
So say, because my oldest is moving into that age where it's a really cool thing to be like on social media, and and growing up with social media, like I am not naive to what is possible with social media and who can they can come across or be in contact with. And so like it was really, really funny because, well, I guess it's not funny. We tried to, do the approach of, we're going to talk about, some things that are safe on social media and some things that aren't safe on social media.
Right.
And, we don't give this type of information and we don't do these types of things, like really trying to prepare her to enter that world of social media. Because it's such a weird thing. Like, I can't imagine how our parents navigated social media as it's, like, blossoming.
Well, yeah.
Just,
I mean,
how did you,
my parents' introduction to social media was me.
Yeah.
I mean, they learned about social media from me. I mean, I was a full-fledged adult when social media came out, so but that's how they learned about it. Now, my obligation as the parent to kids who have only known social media and only known the type of technology that we have where we walk around with computers in our pockets, I need to be ahead of the game. I need to be always aware of what's coming, when it's coming, what is already available, how kids are using it. I need to make myself informed on all of those things because that's the only way to keep your kids safe. A lot of people come up to me and go, how do you filter? What kind of filters do you put on your internet? And what do you do for your Wi-Fi? Do you let your kids have your password? And I'm like, listen, the only filter that matters is the one between your ears.
Yeah.
Because if you don't teach your kids what is okay and what is not, then it doesn't matter what filters you put on your computer systems. They will get past it. That's the nature of technology. They will they'll find out the neighbor's Wi-Fi password and use theirs. Whatever they got to do, they'll circumvent it. And so it's you're doing the right thing. Just so you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about the things that the expectations that you have for their social media use. You're talking about what is a good thing to post and what is not a good thing to post. And it should go a little bit further than that as they get older, right?
Sure, yeah.
So one of the really big problems with social media is this idea of fake news, right? It's a tragic nomenclature that we've developed over the last 18 months. But the reality is that so much of what we see on social media is immediately perceived as being a legit source, to the degree that they fact-checked, CNN recently fact-checked a parody site. So like The Onion, right? Which is a parody site. So they fact-checked a parody site. And, that's the point. That's where we've got, is these sources are just completely unreliable. And so part of our job as parents and part of our job as human beings, really, right, is to start identifying what is fake news and what is not, and trying to develop a way of distinguishing the fake from the not fake.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, as fake news purveyors, right, get more sophisticated, it becomes more and more difficult.
Yeah.
And so you might go to a site and think, oh, well, there's no real ads on here. It looks like it's an authoritative site. They got all these links inside the text that go to things, like sources.
Right.
And you're like, wow, this is really... No, it's not. You go check the sources. They go to things that were written by that same company.
Right.
Right. So you have to be really careful and in evaluating the media that you take in. And so that's part of our job as parents too. It's just an overwhelming job because so many of us struggle with that ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's a genuinely difficult thing to go through all of the data inputs, all of the sources that we receive in a day.
Yeah.
To be able to determine what is trustworthy and what is not trustworthy.
Yeah.
And it's a full-time job.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad my husband takes care of most of that. He's notorious for just reading article after article. He's like, oh, nope, that's fake. Okay, we're moving on. How did you know so fast? He's like, I just know. I'm like, okay, all right, well, I trust you. We'll go with that.
Sometimes it's really straightforward, and you get a sense of things the more you investigate and the more you read things.
Yeah.
You get a sense of it. But I'll tell you, it's not always as straightforward as you like.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because, we live in a world that has generated more in terms of content in the space of a day than was done in the first 2,000 years of, or the previous 2,000 years of humanity's existence.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable amount of content, an unbelievable amount of words and visual media and everything else.
And then looking at that from a parent's perspective, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
But, as long as we talk to our kids and we inform them and we keep ourselves informed, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, that's generally the best way to handle those things. Yeah. It's not always the easiest or the funnest job, but every generation has something that they have to overcome. Previous generations, my parents' generation and my generation, I guess, had to deal with TV and cable and all of these things coming out. And my parents would constantly say that you're going to rot your brain watching all that TV. And culture adapts and people adapt and our mores, our values, the way we integrate these different technologies. It takes time. Unfortunately, now it's sort of the pace of change is speeding up.
It's incredible.
And so culture is taking longer to integrate these changes than it's taking for the changes that are coming. And so that's the biggest problem now, is that we're in this kind of cycle where technology is about 10 steps ahead of where the culture is integrating that into how we work and making it actually useful. So
culturally, like, one of the things that really is at the forefront of my mind always is mental health, and like how social media impacts mental health, especially in our youth. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, look at all of this stuff. Look at all of these things. Look at how much access their classmates have to them, how much access other people have to them if they don't know how to navigate those arenas. And I guess I wish that there was more education on that. Not just for the kids, but for the parents too.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. And that's one thing I've tried to talk to. I've talked to a couple of church groups and some school groups and stuff like that about that subject. And Facebook actually did a study. They commissioned a study with a college, I can't remember which one right now, but that looked at social media use and how it impacted psychological well-being. Okay, so the people who use social media and were what we call lurkers, they just kind of scroll through and read everybody's comments and read everybody's content, but never engage, right? They never put their comments. Yeah, exactly. Those and all of us to some degree are those people, right? We're all kind of voyeurs and just kind of in it to see what's going on in everybody else's life. But the people who did mostly that, right, differed dramatically from the people who engaged and started conversations and enjoyed conversations and participated in them and added their own content and stuff like that. So there were basically two parts of of social media use that it happened. People who were the traditional lurkers had significantly more problems with social anxiety, depression, lots and lots of issues from a psychological well-being perspective. The people who were more social used it as social media as opposed to just another news feed, right?
Right.
They were virtually unchanged. They didn't have any social issues. They didn't have any major psychological impact that was outside of the realm of normal.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that, I talk to my kids. I don't want to see you just doing this on Instagram all day long. I want to see you doing some of the little thumb button stuff, and communicating, using it as a means of connecting.
Yeah, having them evaluate why they're using it.
Yeah.
Why are you here? Why are you on Facebook?
Exactly.
Are you here to just scope everything out, or do you want to talk to some people? Because that's what we're here to do. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so that helps a little bit. The other thing is to, and this applies to everybody now, which is surprising. But the other thing is we have to breathe the same air. Right? We have to. This environment that we're in right here, we're breathing the same air. I can see you directly right here in front of me. Right. That's wildly important to our well-being mentally and psychologically and emotionally. Yeah. Being able to connect with people in tangible ways is a really important part of maintaining, mental health.
Definitely. I think that obviously that's what spurred all of this. All of this podcast and blogging and stuff, and I feel like I could only do much writing about it, and I can only do so much, doing a video about something, and I can only do so much doing a podcast, or I can, you know what I mean? Like, I wish there was like a magical way to just spur that in everybody, like, hey, you need to be with people sometimes.
Yeah.
More often than you might think.
I wish there was. You think about, I think about like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and people who they all got together and they talked to each other and they shook hands and they enjoyed a brandy together and whatever. They spent time with each other physically in the same space, and they shared that. And to me, some of these people in the past are towering intellects. And I think that's something that we're missing today that is really important part of how we socialize and connect and communicate. And so and it becomes worse because the traditional spaces for that are becoming passé and culturally irrelevant, like churches, right? Yeah. Religion has been where we congregate. Right. Well, there's a reason it's called a congregation, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, religion is kind of become passé and culturally irrelevant for a lot of current generations and even past generations, and to the degree that we're really disconnected. Yeah. Right? We no longer have that going to Sunday and wearing our Sunday best and shaking hands with our neighbors and maybe even shaking hands with the people we don't like, and all of those things that happen in that kind of a religious and church type setting really kind of has gone away, and so we're left with this kind of disconnect. Yeah. And so part of my business name is Connect Now. Right. It doesn't look like it, but it's because it's anyway. So the business name is Connect Now, and part of that was I want social media to be the connection. Right. Right. I don't want social media to be just another means of communicating. Yeah. I want it to be a way of connecting with each other. And so back to that Cheers philosophy where everybody knows your name, right? That's really important to me because we can develop that with people that are disconnected from us in physical space, but connected to us at least mentally and in some ways emotionally through social media. It's not enough, right, for our own mental well-being to leave it all there. We need to have the human touch so to speak, and be able to, like I said, breathe the same air as someone.
Yeah.
But there's ways to navigate that, and I think culture eventually will get there. There's going to be a lot of growing pains. We're all experiencing them to a degree, but I think my kids and your kids are going to be at the forefront of making those changes culturally. We're seeing some of that with student activism right now, in response to the gun shooting and them being able to have a voice when they didn't really seem to have a voice in the zeitgeist of the conversation in the world. And so I think kids are learning the power and learning what they have at their fingertips, and as they kind of navigate that, they'll be at the front end of the cultural shift that will make it less damaging than it is right now, because it's really damaging. It's genuinely damaging right now.
Yeah.
And suicide rates are up 70% since 2012, and that's a horrible statistic. That's a statistic that should never have existed.
Yeah.
And you look at the time frames, and guess what? That's pretty consistent with social media use and the advent of the iPhone and having computers in our pockets. And so you put those types of things together, and hopefully we'll recognize the damage that things are causing, and we'll kind of course correct and find a way to integrate those in a way that won't be as damaging.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I definitely think that it will happen. It will happen, and the next generation will definitely, be at the forefront of that. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel like because they're being raised with it even more so than, everyone before, like, they're going to know it even better, and they're going to understand that, this is good. This is what we should be using this for, and this is really damaging to us, and we need to look at these things, and we need to figure out, first of all, why and how, and really dive into that so that way we can dissect it a little bit more,
Yeah, and there's actually biological changes that'll have to take place as well. There's things that will have to change within the way our brain patterns work, right, to accommodate some of these things. We see some of that. My grandparents have slides where they took a picture of their TV of the lunar landing. When they go out and plant the flag, they have pictures on slides for that.
Really?
And to me, I'm like, wow, that is really cool.
Yeah.
But they had a TV box that was like this, and a screen that was about this big.
Teeny tiny, yeah.
And that's what they took a picture of, is that one slide, and they can show that. And my grandparents are now on social media.
Yeah.
They're in their 80s, and they're on social media, and they're communicating with me and with my kids and with as many people as they can connect with, and to see to conceive of what they've seen in their lifetime, and to realize that what we've seen in our lifetime is substantial compared to my great grandparents, for example, who have passed.
Yeah,
they saw a lot, but just in my few short years, and I'm old, but we won't get into numbers. In my few short years, I've seen a lot of change from the point when I was 10 years old and we got a computer. Oh my gosh, a computer!
Right.
And I could play Carmen Sandiego and all these fantastic games that were just like that. People are like, Carmen, what are you talking about?
Solitaire, man.
Yeah,
Solitaire.
Right. And I was just so elated that I had a computer, and my dad's like, oh, you gotta, instead of handwriting all of your stuff, you gotta start typing it. And I'm like, whatever, Dad.
Yeah.
And then I started typing, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is way better, right?
Yeah.
And developing that and changing those thought patterns and being able to connect with that. And I think about, TV was just a visual radio when it came out, and then it became a commonplace. It was in everybody's home, And then cable comes and adds lots more content to that. And people got cable, and now you're weird if you don't got cable.
Right.
Well, the only exception is cable, to the cord cutters, right? who now have Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and YouTube Red, and so they've got all these other sources of content that they're pulling in, and so we really are in this situation where we've had to change culturally for all these different technologies, and that's part of. I
always refer to myself as a cable cutter now. I got more cable cutters, sorry. No.
Yeah, that's we walk into Costco, and I love the people at Costco because they're always just very chill, right? But they're all like, "Hey, so do you know what you're paying for your cable?" And I'm like, "Nothing."
0.
And they're like, "Well, do you want more channels?" No. I've got all the content I can handle.
Yeah.
And
it's a tough game being in that cable business.
Yeah, it is. It's rough, and I almost feel for them, but I don't really.
Yeah.
I got enough content to satisfy my needs, and more than I need in reality. Yeah. And we have lots of technology that's going to be rolling over in the next 18 months that's going to change things even more.
Yeah.
5G internet networks for your phones and for your house.
Yeah.
And so the starting bandwidth for 5G is faster than your current cable connection. And so that's going to be available to your phone now. Faster than cable. You can watch 4K content from your phone. No buffering. It'll be a beautiful thing.
I was going to say, that sounds like the perfect
Yeah, it's like, wow, my life changes. But that enables VR. That enables artificial or augmented reality. That enables all these other technologies that are going to piggyback off of that bandwidth and enable us to change the landscape even more technologically. So it's and socially, because it changes because with that type of bandwidth, we can do virtual reality. I can go to a family reunion without leaving my house, right? And so that's kind of the space we're in, and because it will be wireless, it'll be available in rural America. And so now, instead of everybody congregating in the cities in order to gain access to really important services, we can spread out a little bit because we'll have these pinpoint feeds from wireless towers that can stream in, massive amounts of bandwidth. And so that's kind of where things are going to be going over the next couple of years, is that 5G is going to change the landscape dramatically. Cable companies could be losing even more, and most of them are providing the internet services that are causing cord cutters.
Right. So, what medias do you work with specifically?
I work with a lot. So I can do websites. That's not my primary business function. So I help people build websites or organize their websites and make them a little bit better and nicer looking. But the biggest thing that I work with companies with, or individuals if they're really interested, is I either train them how to do their social media or I do their social media. And so when I talk about social media, I can pretty much do all of it. YouTube becomes really difficult because it's super time intensive. I mean, this took some time to get all set up, and it's going to go on YouTube, and it's going to go on Facebook, and it's going to go on all it's going to go on all these different places, and that takes time to set up and to do right. This is done right.
Thank you.
Good job. But for the average business owner to be able to do that, that's not tenable. That's really rough, right? That's going to be really difficult for them to do. So they're going to have to find other alternatives to doing that. And so YouTube is one that I don't always kind of manage for a client, but I will teach them how to use it and how to integrate it into their business workflow and how to make it part of their social media strategy.
Sure. I was going to say, because there is a way to use social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of the things that I teach people are, first of all, there's a lot of people that don't even understand the mechanics. And when I talk about mechanics and I go, click there. Okay, now you're going to click there. Yep. And you're going to type this. and then you click there.
You're a very patient person.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of that type of stuff that I do with people that the mechanics of it is still beyond the reach of some people.
Yeah.
And so for the training part, unfortunately there's a lot of people that I have to work through that process before we can get into the part where we're talking about theory. Okay? And theory is, for me, and it might be different for other social media people, but ultimately there's a new way of doing business. We no longer should be doing business B2C or B2B. Everything needs to be H to H, so human to human. Okay? And so teaching businesses how to behave human to human as opposed to business to consumer or business to business is a massive shift. It's just a complete shift for a lot of companies, because when they post something, they immediately want to post something that uses business language. Okay? The minute we use business language in our social media posts, we have separated ourselves from social part of media.
Right.
And that's where everybody derails. Okay. And so training people to recognize that they are the company, right?
Man, did I struggle with that with social media in the beginning. I thought, I really want to be able to put this out, because ultimately everything that I work on is me, essentially. There's really no separation. And I was talking with my husband about this, when I'm kind of formulating how it's all going to work and look, and I'm like, well, why can't I just put this here, on Instagram? That's really what I'm doing right now, and that's really what it looks like right now. And he's like, yeah, but don't you want it to look clean and professional? And I'm like, well, I don't really feel clean and professional right now, and this is just where I'm at, I don't know if that's a good thing or if that's a bad thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing that so many businesses struggle with, is because they feel like it has to be a professional thing in order for it to be effective. And I go, seriously, if you're a business owner and you're not taking pictures of your food, right, you're missing the boat.
Right, yeah.
As sad as that sounds, it's a reality. If you're not sharing what makes you a human being, we don't do business today with anybody that, outside of, some big box stores like Amazon, we don't do business walking store to store with the business. We do it with the person.
Right.
And we do it with the relationship.
Right.
And even Amazon develops relationships with us, even if they're kind of email-based or whatever, we kind of develop a relationship through some of those things. But ultimately, we do business with a person.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where the advantage is for, we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast here, is that it has leveled the playing field, because we get to connect with people on social media.
Yeah.
Not with a business. With people. Right. And that's a big difference, and that's a really important difference. So businesses that are all business all the time, unfortunately, they don't that doesn't translate.
Yeah.
That's not the social element that they need.
Yeah.
And so if they learn how to communicate in the way that they would normally communicate with just any other person that was walking down the street, that's good. That's what they need to be doing. So I kind of turn it on its head. I go, the experience someone has with you in your business should be reflected on social media. So if someone comes in and they're a regular and you're like, hey, how's the kids doing? That's the type of relationship that they have with you. That should be what they experience on social media. They should be able to communicate with you and get to know you on a more personal level. And the more you're exposing that to your audience, the more connected you are.
Why do you think people fight that so much? Do you think it's just because we've looked at it a certain way for so long?
Yeah. Here's an example. Have you ever watched Mad Men?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's why.
Okay.
Those guys are why we always treat this that way. Okay. That's the problem, is that everything is business. We're always selling. Right? We always got to make a buck on everything that we do.
Yeah.
And that's where things become problematic. And so I always say the only place that anybody wants to see advertisements is on Super Bowl Sunday. That's it.
It's true.
That's the only time anybody wants to see advertisements. That's why we cut the cord. Right? So we can watch it on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, right? Because we don't want to watch our commercials. We don't want to be sold on anything.
Right.
And, even Facebook introducing commercials in the middle of
oh my
videos.
gosh, that is so frustrating to me. I'm watching these cute little videos of these kids do funny things, and then I'm interrupted by it.
Yep, absolutely. And so no one really wants that. We don't want to be put in. We don't want to be advertised to.
Yeah.
And if that's all you're doing with social media is basically that madman always be selling, or always be closing, whatever, right? If you're pushing that on social media, you have totally failed. That's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of the big businesses, the big companies, that's the only option they have. Because they're forking out money.
Right.
That money has to produce more money than we put out all the time.
Right.
But if you have developed a close-knit social community around your brand, you have an advantage because those people are going to talk to each other through your content.
Yeah.
They're going to talk to each other in real life. They're going to talk to other people in real life about your brand, and you're going to develop community around that. And that's how you use social media as a small business owner. You can't view it as another way of advertising. You can't view it as the radio or the TV or the newspaper or or digital ads on Google or anything. You can't do it that way because that's not what it is. It's social first.
Right. Always social first.
Yeah. And so that's the key to being successful on social media.
Okay.
And social takes a lot of different there's a lot of different tangents off of that, right? That you can capitalize on that will be business related, that can help promote you and make you more relevant and make you be the expert and there's a lot of ways to capitalize on that. But ultimately the first thing you got to do is remember that you got to be social first.
Yeah.
Everything falls off of that.
Yeah. See, I have a hard time coming away from that sometimes. So I'm like, oh, there's people. Okay, we're just going to talk, and then we're going to talk about this, and then that, and then, oh, what were we doing? I can't remember now. I don't know.
Yeah, and it can be distracting, and there are times when, you're doing that, and you're not seeing any return on it. And so for a business, the return on investment is important. You have to make money.
Yeah.
You can't just spend lots of time on social media. And so there has to be this kind of balance between what you're doing there, what you're asking your audience to do for you, which is ultimately put money in your back pocket, and how you do that and gain their trust to make them do that, or convince them to do that. You don't make anybody do anything. But,
right.
that's kind of the struggle, is kind of playing the long game without losing your shirt.
Yeah, I think that's always a struggle.
Yeah.
Whether you're using social media or any other means.
Right. I hate pulling Amazon back into this, but Amazon just barely started making a profit.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
They just barely started making a profit to where they could actually have dividends to give to investors.
Yeah.
And because of that, their stocks have risen dramatically because they're only going to make more and more money because they capture a bigger and bigger piece of the pie. But
they definitely are playing the long game.
But yeah, they played the long game. From a guy who took a door off of its hinges and put it on 2 sawhorses working out of his garage to,
having their own
recently
banks.
Having their own banks and becoming recently the richest man in the world. I mean, there's that's a big shift, and it's definitely playing the long game because between Prime and everything else that they're doing, where they're basically eliminating all of the potential profit centers, they just played it out, and investors saw the vision and enabled them to do it.
Yeah.
And doing the same thing with your own business is a really important thing to do.
Yeah.
And social media is all part of that because you go where the people are.
Yeah. I know that you had mentioned this idea of social media being saturated and what we do in that arena.
Yeah, it is. It's super saturated because now we've got. Here's a case in point. Facebook shows you a small fraction of the total amount of content of your friends. Mm-hmm. So when you're going on and you see 5 or 6 friends post regularly, mm-hmm. guess what? The other 500 friends that you have, they also post regularly. Mm-hmm. But you just don't see them. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's what I mean by saturated. Okay. The reason that you're only seeing those 5 or 6 friends is because those are the people that Facebook has identified as being most likely that you will engage with. That you're more likely to communicate back and forth, you're more likely to connect with them. And some of that has to do with geographic space, some of that has to do with relationship status, familial status. All of that is, I can't even imagine the math that's involved in that. But there's a lot of these types of algorithms that are used to identify what's the kind of content that is going to keep you on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's really all that matters. They want to keep you on there as long as possible.
Which works great for Facebook, but what about if you're, a business owner?
Right. Yeah, that's a problem.
What do you do?
So now you have to find space in that newsfeed that is actually only showing a small fraction of the possible content.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at with saturation. And so we have this situation, and Facebook is the easiest one to draw this example from because most people identify with it. But it's also true of the other social networks, but just to a lesser degree. Mm-hmm. With Facebook, what we have is a situation where your newsfeed is already impossibly full. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so that means that if a business wants to enter the newsfeed, they pay Facebook. Well, guess what? There are 15 billion just millions of other businesses that want to inject their ad into that newsfeed as well.
Right.
Well, if Facebook was doing right by their investors, mm-hmm. they'd take everybody's money and just start shoving things in there.
Yeah.
But then there's that problem. As users, the product, right, we would revolt and quit using it. So there's this balance. And so we've reached this saturation point now where our content feeds are so chaotic and so full. Mm-hmm. And the amount of injected content is what we'll call it, paid for content that needs to go in there in order for Facebook to turn a profit to keep their investors happy and to keep their business owners happy. Mm-hmm. The people who are paying their wages, right? Mm-hmm. In order to keep everybody happy, there's a certain amount of inventory that's available before these users just say, screw off, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the point we've reached is saturation. And with the algorithm that they made, some of the algorithmic changes that they made in January, what's happening is that they've recognized that. They've reached saturation point. They've reached the point where they can't add anymore before the users, the product, revolts and says, peace out, we're done.
Right.
And so that's what I mean by saturated. We're at this point where we can't consume enough media, and so the businesses are going to end up paying more to be injected into our media feeds. Yeah. And so it becomes a more costly venture as things go on.
Yeah.
The more social we treat it, the less likely that is to be. The less likely you are to need to pay Facebook to be injected in there.
Sure. But let's say that you did. Let's say that you wanted to promote something, and I know that they give you the option to tag certain or create certain groups of people that you're trying to, be in front of. Do you think that those are really relevant as far as how specific you can get, or is it broader the better? Because you just don't know with so much.
Okay, so here's where it comes down to making business decisions, right? So there's a couple of ways of viewing it. You can say, okay, the more general I can be, the more people see it. I don't know who's actually going to be interested, but if 5 million people see it versus 5,000, well, then I might reach everybody that I need to reach. That's not the way you want to do it.
Yeah.
you want to focus on the people that are actually going to exchange money with you, because to reach that 5 million people, you have to pay a big old stack of bills, right? But to reach 5,000 people, it's a much smaller stack of bills. Yeah. And as long as you're targeting the people that are actually going to turn around and hand you a paycheck, that's an acceptable exchange of dollars, right?
Sure.
And so Facebook and all the social networks, to one degree or another, have the ability to be super targeted, crazy targeted, to the point where it can be, like a neighborhood even.
Yeah.
And that's an important granular element of it, that you're able to fine-tune your advertising to the people that are actually going to do business with you.
One of those lovely time-consuming things.
Yeah, it is. And it really is, because you run into a situation where you have to identify your target market by kind of nebulous traits, right? How old are they? What gender are they? What is their annual income? What kind of TV shows do they watch? I mean, really kind of nebulous things that you can focus on. But the more you know about your business and your audience, the more targeted you can become, and get to the point where you're just like, well, those 500 people need to hear my message, so I'm going to hit those 500 people, and I'm going to make them all come in with checkbook in hand, debit card really, or phone. Yeah, exactly. and
you were
and
they're gonna old school with that checkbook.
I know, right? Wow, I'm really old. But yeah, that's kind of the idea. Is they're going to come in and they're going to do that. Yeah. They're going to use their Bitcoin wallet or whatever, pay for whatever I'm trying to sell. Yeah. And that's kind of where things are going, is that and that's the only reason why that saturation is okay, because you can be so targeted.
Sure.
Because you're not impacting millions of people necessarily. Sure. You're impacting people that probably want to see your content in the first place. Yeah. Because you've already identified them as being in need.
Sure. Yeah, that makes much more sense. So. It is crazy how saturated it is, and how many... I just feel like there's just so much. There's so much in the way of trying to get your stuff into somebody else's feed, or to, like, you're looking at it and you're like, wait a minute, I haven't connected with this person, and I haven't seen them post anything in forever, and then you can go check their page and you're like, wow, they're posting all the time. Like, why? So we should just interact with everybody on our friends list? Like, how do we keep them in our news feed?
And then you need to have Amazon deliver everything, because you can't leave the house.
Yeah, that's all you're
because that's all you're going to be doing. Yeah. And that's why, the algorithm is an important thing. Yeah. People always complain about it, but it's really important, because the amount of content would be just way too much. Yeah. And so if you're thinking, if you're inspired to think about someone, communicate with them. Yeah. Just forget that you haven't heard from them, and realize that they're still existing, and you need to get out and connect with them. Yeah. And that's all part of being social. I mean, we no longer... I'm in the midst of my 20-year... oh my word. I'm going to go out on a cane. 20-year high school reunion this year. And I'm thinking to myself, what do we need a reunion for? Yeah. I can connect with all of the people in my entire class through social media.
That's crazy that you say that, because that's exactly what I thought about our last reunion. I was thinking, why would I even go? Like, everybody that I talk to, and those are the people I want to talk to. Like,
right. It's kind of, we've kind of gotten into this environment where, it doesn't matter that so-and-so lives, in Pennsylvania.
Right. Or Australia. Or yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because what's going on in their lives, because they're publishing it on a pretty frequent basis. That they got married, they had 2 kids, that they have a dog that they love, that, all the important things.
Which is kind of cool, but kind of creepy sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, definitely for that ex that you shunned way back in, sophomore year, that's definitely creepy status. But it's good because you have those connections, but sometimes it's good to have separation.
Yeah.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
That is so true. So true. So looking at social media, like in terms of locally and how it's used in our community and with businesses locally, and not just businesses, but just like a lot of events and gatherings, I feel like, again, we keep pulling back to Facebook, but like this concept of creating events for certain things and like having reminders, and I feel like it's a really cool tool for the community. I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I've been pushing for it to be a bigger part of our community for a long time. I organize Social Media Day, June 30th every year is Social Media Day. I organized a Social Media Day event for several years and tried to kind of get the community to understand what social media is about and how it can be an integral part of what we do as a community and how we communicate with each other and how we organize. And Tri-Cities is pretty unique. We have a highly educated population that should be at the very bleeding edge of everything that's coming in.
Yeah.
But we have a cultural situation where everybody's kind of, we'll wait and see what happens. And so that puts us at a kind of a disadvantage in terms of technology and in terms of embracing some of the changes that are available through social media, for example. And I think in terms of social media, we're finding our footing in the Tri-Cities, and I think that's a great thing. I'm seeing businesses posting more and more events, which is fantastic. You can go to the events tab on Facebook and holy crap, I'm not bored.
Interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we want. I want to see is those types of things happening, because that provides us, that bridges that gap. We talked about how religion was that place where we shook hands and kissed babies, right?
So our event tab is going to be that place,
right?
Kind of coordinate.
Yeah, until they become virtual events, but.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of the thing, and I'm really excited about the Tri-Cities. I started this business in 2011. When I started it, there was nobody doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
No one really considered social media a real viable option. It was still trendy.
Yeah.
And now I'm finding myself looking at the marketplace, doing my SWOT analysis, right?
Yeah.
And saying, wow, there are a lot of competitors in this marketplace. And most of them have come into the marketplace within the last year or two, which is good. It shows that there's a marketplace for people like me to help businesses, but it also means that businesses want that help.
Yeah.
And this is a really subtle plug, but I'm going to say this in generalized terms. Businesses who aren't comfortable doing social media cannot afford not to hire someone to do it. They absolutely have to hire someone to do their social media. They absolutely have to do that. I have high school students. They have a social media class that they can learn how to use social media for businesses.
That's awesome.
So they're training them in high school. I mean, I used to say don't trust a high schooler with social media. I still say don't trust a high schooler with social media. Yeah. But the key here is that they're getting the training early.
Right.
They're getting their feet under them at an early age, because, frankly, every business is going to need to employ someone that is fluent in social media. And for the companies that aren't hiring people and they're trying to do it on their own, there's a place for them. And I think that that's a really admirable thing to do, because, as I said,
it's a full-time job.
You are the face of your business. You are the business. You are the human that makes that human-to-human work, right? But the bigger you get, the more customers that you need to connect with, the more scale that you have to your business, the more employees you have, the more imperative it is to have someone that's going to manage that social media for you. Because even though it's a free product to work with, it's not something that you can just expect to not invest in. Yeah,
time is valuable.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And up until January, I said you could do all of your social media in about 15 minutes a day. That's not true anymore.
Okay, I was going to say, I am doing something really wrong.
No, it's simply not true anymore. And the investment in time has become substantially more because you have to, the quality of the content has to be significantly better. The targeting of it has to be better. The creation, the strategy behind it has to be thought out and reasoned and worked through to make sure that it's actually going to be effective.
Yeah.
And so with that comes an increasing cost to maintain social media, but if the big guys can't handle business without social media, you shouldn't either.
Yeah.
And so you need to be investing in that. And you know, I'm here, but I now have a lot of great competitors that are just as capable of handling those services for you as I am. And that's an important thing. There's people available for you to make sure that you don't fall behind, that you don't lose competitive ground.
I used to, because I was a personal trainer before, and figuring out, you know, okay, this is my budget for advertising, this is my budget for this is equipment, this is whatever, you know, fees to the gyms or whatever. I automatically lumped social media in with advertisement, which was not a good idea. That was not a good thing. Social media needs to be its own category, and advertising is completely separate. I mean, going back to, like you were saying, it's a social thing, so we should use it that way. Yeah. But, like, as far as, like, allocating funds, it needs to be its own thing.
Yeah, so I talk to a lot of businesses where they're like, they already have radio going, they have TV going, they have circular spots, they have all sorts of things going on all over the place that they're paying, you know, traditional media prices for. Yeah. And then when someone like me comes in and says, oh, by the way, you should invest in social media, and they're like, well, why?
Because all those ads are going to direct them back to social media.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to find you.
Yeah, because those are the first few touches that someone's going to have with you, is maybe the TV or the radio or something like that. They're going to say, oh, wonder what's up with that company. Yeah. Well, in order to find out what's up with that company, they're going to go to social media, and they're going to try and find you there. And they're going to go to your website. So, again, I always talk to people, businesses, I go, you can't use social media as a website. That doesn't work. You have to have a website. That's your first social network. It's the only one you will ever own. So use it right. Yeah. Okay? Build your community around your website. Social media should be the funnel into that website that theoretically will generate your business. But that's kind of the game you have to play. And I like that you talked about social media as being its kind of own entity and separating it from the advertising side of things, because it becomes a communications platform when you do that. It doesn't become an advertising platform. Right. And when you're communicating, that's a much more natural exchange of human-to-human interaction than when you're treating it as though it's an advertising venue. Sure. Yeah. It can still be an advertising venue, which is fantastic. Sure. You can still drop some of that advertising dollars into it, but it's important to understand that it needs that social element too.
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like the Tri-Cities is definitely coming up to speed with social media.
Yeah, we're definitely getting there. Hopefully we get there before it changes again, right?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, and I think...
Or we could just jump into the next thing.
That would be swell. I doubt that would happen, but it's funny because you have new networks popping up all over the place, and people have never heard of them. Have you ever heard of Ello? Have you ever heard... Probably not. Oh, okay. But it was a network that it still exists, and it's still got some activity on it. Yeah. And there's an opportunity to make money as a business, and it's a space. It has its own kind of quirky community. Yeah. But then there's a recent one that came out within the last couple of months that's called Vero. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of Vero, yes.
Yeah, it got a lot of buzz. Yeah. Hasn't gone very far, but it got a lot of buzz. Yeah. And it has a kind of different monetization perspective. You're actually going to pay a fee to be involved in it, which is really different. Right. You're no longer the product.
Right.
Which is refreshing.
Yeah.
Now, do I think it has wheels? Not yet. And maybe never.
Yeah.
But there's these other networks that kind of pop up, and they show up every once in a while, and you're like, ooh, I'm so excited. Well, never mind. Facebook's easier.
Yeah, right. They're starting to make it so easy.
Right. And the problem is that a lot of the times that there's nothing really new or innovative about those products, other than kind of their mission statement.
Sure.
Right? And so their Vero is basically Instagram.
Yeah.
I mean, it's functionally the same. You have a little bit more fine-tuned control over who sees what and when, and it is unique in that perspective. But it largely serves the same purpose as Instagram. So it's not like it can't be copied.
Sure.
Because all they added was filterable things that you can change how many people can see certain posts.
Yeah.
And they made it easy. Well, all Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whoever has to do is throw that same filter in, and bam, they're the same. And so it becomes really hard for you to topple the big guys when they can immediately copy what you've done.
Yeah, somebody's gonna have to come up with something like really brilliant.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I really felt like Google Plus had it.
Did you?
They had it nailed down.
Yeah.
But it was seen as being too geeky and too involved to make things work with. But I think I genuinely thought Google Plus had it nailed down. They couldn't be competed with. They had all of the right things going in, all the right filters, all the right privacy settings, all the right way of sharing content, and it's still there. All of that's available. You can go to Google Plus today and do all of these things that I'm talking to you about, and it is fan-freaking-tastic.
Yeah.
Facebook does it, but they do it really poorly. And they make it really sticky and hard to kind of mess around with. So, have you ever used lists on Facebook? Yeah, where you're only communicating with a small subsection of your friends?
Yes.
That is very cumbersome. It's not easy to use. It's not click a drop down and then bam, you got all your options. It's click a drop down, click another thing, and then now you've got all of your options, and then you have to search through them and figure out which ones you want. Google Plus had a much better way of doing that. They had circles, and it was so much more granular, and you could have multiple circles, and it was super easy to use, and it was just too geeky.
I feel like I should have given Google Plus more of a chance now.
Well, I feel like everybody should have, but it still is a really great network, and it's still pretty active. It's lost a lot of its mojo because of some changes, and because frankly people felt like they were saturated with other social networks, and so adding one more was just a bridge too far.
Just tipped them over.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's all we can take.
Yeah, so we'll see. Someone will come up with something that isn't so geeky and maybe
probably
has a little
Amazon.
Probably. But Amazon or Apple, one of the two. I mean, Apple will probably.
Ooh, Apple.
They'll twist their little little switch and bam.
I feel like maybe it's just me, but I feel like Apple is like, you know how when a company kind of goes and not hiding, but they kind of pull back a little bit. And I feel like whenever I feel, especially a tech company, kind of like, I mean, they're not like out of the game. They're clearly there and they're holding their spot, but like you can tell they're kind of like
the shine's not there anymore. But like, you say that, it's interesting because this happened to Microsoft. Microsoft it really was the only thing available for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, you had Apple, but they didn't really exist.
Right.
1, maybe 2% of the market share, right? And to the point where they had to get money from Microsoft to even survive.
Yeah.
And so that money came in the form of them adopting the Microsoft Office products and being able to put those on Macs.
Right.
And so that kind of put them back into the game. They gained a little bit of market share. They produced some really fantastic products from a design aesthetic. And because they're in control of the hardware and the software, everything is really tight. Everything just works. And that's what Steve Jobs was always saying. It just works. And it does. And it is fantastic. The problem is that they've gotten to the point where it just works, but 2 years after everybody else made it work.
Yeah.
And so they're not innovative anymore. And so they bring everything right up to really cool, and it's designed right, and everybody's like, oh, that's so more human. But then you tell them, oh, well, I had that on my phone 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And now everybody's like, well, why am I just getting it?
Yeah. Well, that's what you get when you're with Apple right now.
But, I mean, Apple still has a lot of potential, and they have the most cash sitting in their coffers to pull off something grandiose.
That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for it. I'm just like, whoa, that's yes, that's what we would expect from Apple. Thank you for doing that now. You know?
And I expect that to happen. I think they still want to be perceived as a premium product, and that's a really important place for them to hold in the marketplace. And
I don't think that's bad. I think that's good on them.
No, it's fantastic. It definitely means that they're never going. Rolls-Royce is still relevant.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apple will maintain relevance by being at the top of their game.
Yeah.
And being the high-end product.
Right.
And so that I think is going to be their saving grace, and then they just have to pull off another iPhone.
Yeah.
Just
that's all they gotta do. Maybe it'll be in the shape of some spectacular social media platform that gives us all of the things that we want.
Yeah, that satisfies everybody. Yeah. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you came here and talked to me today about social media, and my brain is just like swimming with possibilities now. I needed this because I get so bogged down with social media. I just want to throw it out the window sometimes, but I feel much more refreshed and able to look at it with a new perspective and hopefully, make some better moves. I don't know. We'll see.
I tend to think that my best service for most of my clients is just ideas.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it takes fresh eyes for a business to really see their business the right way.
Yeah.
And when they see it through someone else's eyes, all of a sudden everything becomes clearer and they're able to execute more effectively. And that's what I feel like I do a lot of the times with my clients, is I bring in that fresh perspective on their business.
Yeah.
And they get to see their business from outside of the business. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh.
Yeah.
And light bulbs go off. So.
That's awesome.
Or LEDs now, right?
Yeah.
Can't mess with those incandescents anymore.
There you go. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out with us today. And if you need a fresh set of eyes for your business, go see Ben Anderson. Got all of his information in the description, and we will see you guys soon.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you would like to help support Unraveling with Rayne, go to patreon.com/unravelingwithrayne. When you become a patron, you receive bonus content such as behind-the-scenes footage, along with other special content that you won't be able to find anywhere else. Music for Unraveling with Rayne was provided by Barefoot Randy. Studio space was provided by Moody Logic.